Welcome to this explainer. Look, forget about the giant soundworms and the epic space battles for just a second. The real underlying story of Dune is actually a 15,000-year gripping cause and effect chain reaction of human evolution and extreme survival. Seriously, every single faction, every bizarre human adaptation, and every intricate political maneuver you see is a direct response to a massive trauma in humanity's ancient past.
It really all boils down to one massive question, and honestly, it's one that feels surprisingly relevant to us right now. What happens to humanity when thinking machines are outlawed? Forever. To truly understand this universe, we can't just look at the era of Paul Atreides. We have to go way back, 10,000 years before Paul was even born, in fact, to a time when humanity was pushed to the absolute brink of extinction by the very technology it created.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1, the war against machines, better known as the Butlerian Jihad.
So imagine this. For thousands of years, humanity got incredibly complacent. We just handed over all our major decisions to mechanical servants. And eventually, we became enslaved by the very conscious robots and thinking machines we built. When humanity finally broke those chains in a long, grueling, and bloody crusade, the result was immortalized in this defining commandment from the Orange Catholic Bible: "Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind." Now, this wasn't just a gentle religious suggestion. It's literally the fundamental lore mechanic of the entire universe. Humanity fundamentally and violently rejected computers. But they still had a sprawling galactic empire to run. And to do that, the human mind and body had to be pushed to unimaginable extremes just to replace those machines.
Just look at how quickly this all escalated. Back in 21 BG, or BG, an intelligent machine callously killed a human infant, little Mannion Butler, the child of a prominent leader named Serena Butler. This completely senseless tragedy gave the human resistance a martyr, and that grief sparked a relentless holy war. By 150 BG, humanity was taking incredibly desperate measures, launching atomic strikes and initiating what they called the Great Purge. And by 108 BG, they had actually pulled it off, the complete destruction of all intelligent machines. But, as you might guess, winning that war left a massive power vacuum.
And that brings us to our next major shift. Part 2, the rise of the great houses and the new feudal galactic order.
Because computers are gone, instant mass communication and coordination across the stars, completely impossible. So the destruction of machines led directly back to a strict feudal power structure just to maintain basic control. Power was consolidated under a Padishah emperor, who was supported by the noble families that made up the great houses of the Landsraad. On one side, you've got House Atreides. They're built on honor, integrity, and formidable air and sea power on the lush, oceanic world of Caladan. Then, on the complete opposite side, you have their sworn enemies House Harkonnen, built on fear, sadism, and brutal industrial exploitation on the polluted nightmare world of Giedi Prime. And here's the crazy part. Their bitter, bloody feud didn't just start with Paul and the Baron. It actually dates back 10,000 years to a conflict at the Battle of Corran during the Jihad itself.
Which naturally leads us to Part 3, the Spacing Guild Monopoly, and faster-than-light travel.
So, the great houses are locked in their feudal system, right? But how does humanity actually travel between stars without computers to calculate these insanely complex jump routes? Well, space travel relies on a scientific theory called the Holtzman effect, developed by a brilliant mathematician named Norma Senwa. It's basically used to bend space-time, folding reality to place a massive ship at its desired location instantaneously. But without navigation computers to do the math, folding space was wildly unsafe. In fact, before they found a biological solution, these ships suffered a horrific 1 in 8 crash rate. 1 in 8?
So, the biological solution to that terrible crash rate? Bizarre, to say the least. Enter the Guild Navigators. These are heavily mutated humans who are permanently immersed in giant tanks of orange spice gas. The spice melange, which is found only on the desert planet of Arrakis, grants them a form of limited prescience, basically the mental ability to see the future of all possible outcomes. This allows them to foresee the safe paths through folded space and avoid crashing. But the physical toll on their bodies is just immense. They mutate into these giant, fish-like humanoids, completely and utterly dependent on the spice just to survive.
Now, because they are literally the only safe way to travel, the Guild can charge absolutely whatever they want. 1.46 million Solaris. Talk about the ultimate surge pricing, right? That is the staggering financial cost just to transport 3 Guild navigators on a relatively simple round trip. This just goes to show their absolute, unbreakable monopoly over the Imperium. If the spice doesn't flow, the Guild can't navigate, and the entire galactic economy collapses overnight.
All right, shifting gears a bit. Part 4,
the Bene Gesserit shadow game, and the matriarchal order.
Now, the Guild wasn't the only group pushing human potential to the absolute limit. Operating completely in the shadows of the Imperium is the Bene Gesserit. They are a secretive, quasi-monastic sisterhood with a genuinely terrifying dual approach to power. While the Guild focused on mathematics and space travel, the Sisterhood focused entirely on the absolute mastery of the human body, the mind, and the incredibly intricate web of galactic politics. On the biological side, they use prana bindu training for total conscious nerve and muscle control. And of course, the voice, which is a way of modulating their vocal tones to literally hack and command the minds of others. But you have to pair that physical mastery with their sociological tools. They have the Missionaria Protectiva, which is a program that intentionally plants religious myths on primitive worlds so the Sisterhood can manipulate them later. Plus, they run a millennia-long genetic breeding program, carefully crossing key bloodlines to eventually produce a super being. They don't need to command armies, they shape the men who do.
Meanwhile, on the harshest planet in the universe, Part 5, the fierce Fremen survivors, the warriors of Arrakis.
While the Great Houses, the Guild, and the Bene Gesserit are busy playing their delicate political games, the ultimate disruptors were quietly being forged in the background. The ancestors of the Fremen were religious wanderers called the Zen Sunni. They fled persecution and ended up settling in the single harshest environment in the universe, Arrakis. To survive on a world with practically zero surface water, they had to develop incredible physical and cultural tools. They invented still suits, which filter and reclaim body moisture so efficiently that you lose only about a thimbleful of water a day in the deep desert. They use maker hooks to pry open the armor of the massive sandworms, allowing them to literally ride them across the dunes. Their entire economy runs on water rings, which represent communal water wealth. They fight with krisk knives, these sacred, unbreakable blades carved straight from a sandworm's tooth. Basically, Arrakis acted as a brutal crucible, forging an indigenous force of unparalleled guerrilla warriors.
Now, because spice is everywhere on Arrakis, the Fremen diet is completely saturated with it. This grants them the glowing, deep blue eyes of Ibad, but it's not just cosmetic. It enhances their combat abilities and gives them deep, profound ecological visions. Their biology, their daily survival, and their Zen Sunni religion all intertwine completely with the giant sandworms, which they actually revere as physical manifestations of God, calling them Shai Hulud. This hardcore, tightly interwoven survivalist culture creates the ultimate ticking time bomb. It perfectly sets the stage for a massive, violent disruption of the universe's status quo.
And this sets the stage for the absolute peak of this evolutionary chain. Part 6, the terrifying God Emperor, and the climax of human evolution. Because the story of human evolution here doesn't actually end with Paul Atreides joining the Fremen. It all climaxes with his son, Leto II. See, Paul saw a terrible, violent future and ultimately stepped away from it. But Leto II? Leto embraced it. 3,500 years. Just let that unnerving number sink in for a second. That is the length of Leto II's absolute, unbroken reign over the known universe as the God Emperor. By comparison, our entire recorded human history feels like a brief little blip. And he achieved this extreme longevity through a truly horrifying sacrifice. To live that long, Leto actually bonded his own body with the larval stage of the sandworms. He became this nearly immortal human-sandworm hybrid. And he did this to enforce a brutal, uncompromising logic that he called the Golden Path. He deliberately imposed millennial-long stagnation on the entire empire. He hoarded all the spice, he choked the galactic economy, and he basically forced humanity into such oppressive static captivity that they would eventually have to explode outward. His goal was to make them scatter across the universe so vastly that humanity could never be hunted to extinction or ruled by a single tyrant ever again.
To enforce this mandatory, absolute peace, his methods were, well, completely totalitarian. He officially outlawed the Mentat order, the human computers, suppressing any independent thought. He disbanded male armies, believing them to be inherently predatory, and instead formed the all-female Fish Speakers Army to enforce his will. He crushed Fremen autonomy, slowly turning their proud, fierce culture into basically a museum piece. And by tightly regulating planetary water and the spice supply, he deliberately engineered universal boiling resentment across the cosmos. He made himself the ultimate predator, just to teach humanity a permanent lesson about the dangers of centralized power. So, this leaves us with a profound, almost uncomfortable dilemma to end this explainer on.
Is the loss of all free will actually worth the guaranteed survival of the human race? Leto II's terrifying golden path really forces us to ask if absolute, suffocating tyranny is an acceptable price to pay just to ensure our species never goes extinct. It's this lingering, incredibly provocative thought that Frank Herbert baked into the very DNA of Dune. And honestly, it's exactly what makes this 15,000-year history so endlessly fascinating to dig into. Keep questioning the path ahead, and hey, thanks for exploring this incredible universe with me.